granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. Some of you may have noticed I didn't make a video yesterday. And that's because when I come across things like the baby Preston incident, I'm thrown into the feeling that the world has been taken over by evil. And this comes very shortly after the Henry Nowak incident, which is in a way very similar. And it's just getting all too much for me, I think. Baby Preston was born on the 16th of June 2022, and he died on the 17th of July 2023 at the age of 13 months. He was taken into care at 5 days old and placed with foster parents, where he did quite well. I asked Grok, as you can see, why was the baby taken from his mother at 5 days old, and they don't know. Oldham Social Services did it, and this is the possibilities. Suspected substance abuse by the mother, so it doesn't have to be proved. It could be just that they thought perhaps she might have a substance abuse problem. Mental health crisis, domestic violence or instability making the home unsafe. Prior child welfare history, so maybe the baby was born into a family where there'd been problems before. And medical needs that the parent couldn't meet. That is, the baby requiring special care post-birth from some sort of awful disability or something like that, I suppose. That's what's going on. But you see here in this original thing, suspected substance abuse, they're not even giving the mother a chance here. Now, the social services have a lot of power, and they could go into houses, they could kidnap your child, and that's because they have all this power and no accountability. I'm going to be talking about accountability sometime during the rest of this video. But the point is, when people are given unlimited power, they tend to use it, and they tend not to use it very well. So this child was with foster parents and then was finally given to adoptive parents, Jamie Varley, which sounds like some sort of a joke, and John McGowan Fazakerley, which sounds like an even worse joke. Fazakerley, by the way, is an area around Liverpool, so it's not a made-up name, unless he made that up himself, of course. He died. He was taken to these new parents in April 2023 when he was 9 months old, and after that he survived for 4 months. During those 4 months with those two joke parents, he was taken to hospital 3 times. The first time it was with a nosebleed and breathing difficulties. I want you to pay attention to the breathing difficulties because that will turn up again. The second time it was for a rash and bruising, but they didn't say what sort of a rash it was. And the third time it was for a fractured left elbow. The fourth and final time was on July the 27th when he was limp and unresponsive. Varley said that he drowned in the bath. The post-mortem showed there was no drowning there. But what they did find was external and internal trauma. I have to warn you, this isn't nice, and I'm actually circumlocuting here because I just don't want to say these things. He had external and internal trauma on the head, the chest, the limbs. Many of the wounds and injuries were old and had sort of healed. But the most obvious tears and injuries and bruises were in the mouth and the anus. And the cause of death was from some sort of upper airway obstruction. And it definitely wasn't drowning. And now I'm going on to the subject of Henry Nowak. So I've been into that quite a lot. So I'm not going to go into exactly what happened. Some things will become obvious while I'm talking. But there were official reviews of both these cases, and they both point out the bleeding obvious. Both services, the social service, which is an institution set in place to protect children, and they even protected this particular child from its own mother, you see how well that went, and the police, which is an institution set in place to protect the innocent from the ill-intentioned, they both did exactly the opposite. In both situations, the authorities seemed to think it was their job to protect the guilty and facilitate the torture and death of the helpless. And you have to wonder what got into these people. Why did this happen? In both cases, of course, it's utter, complete and abyssal stupidity. The social workers would have seen baby Preston many times, and they didn't say anything, even if they didn't have a medical examination. The police didn't so much as take even the slightest bit of notice of Nowak's warning he'd been stabbed. They didn't even start minimal first aid, even though their remit is to do just that. And even if he was drunk and had fallen over, as his assailant had said, that would require minimal checks on head injuries, but they didn't even try that. Now, the question is, do we know the name of the policeman who was so cold-hearted as to say those immortal words, "I don't think so, mate," when Henry said he'd been stabbed, without even checking him? Do we know his name? No. And do we know the name of the social workers who ignored baby Preston's injuries? No, we don't. There is no accountability. In both cases, the services, the organisations, and even backed up by the government, closed ranks. There is no accountability. And what are we going to get? We're going to get somebody saying, lessons have been learnt. Yeah, years ago in Haringey, in North London, a kid called Victoria Climby, who was actually from Nigeria, but who was staying with a woman who it turns out was not a relative, but she called Auntie. Social workers noticed she appeared frightened of her auntie. And Victoria Climby, whose name I have not forgotten, died of hypothermia while she was tied up in a plastic bag in the attic of her auntie's house, frozen to death in her own urine. Then there was, in the same borough, a toddler called Peter Connolly, whose name I have not forgotten. He was killed by his mother's boyfriend. He had been taken to a doctor at probably the Whittington Hospital days before his death with a broken spine and unable to use his legs. The doctor failed to notice that. She buggered off to Saudi Arabia before they could hold her to account. That's the last we heard of her. Did the British government pursue this doctor? No. It's at times like that I do wish I believed in hell. And in any case, she went to Saudi Arabia to get away from the consequences of her probably racism. But she needn't have gone. No one would have held her accountable. The state would have closed ranks on her like they closed ranks on everything else. Or they might have found some minor functionary to blame for the institutional problems, like possibly Lucy Letby. But we'll leave that subject aside for another day. And then there was a recent case where somebody with a mental problem was taken out to a zoo by two social services operatives. They lost control of him. He grabbed a kid and threw the 3-year-old into the crocodile pit, and the child was seriously injured. Why were those social services people taking somebody as mad as that out, unrestrained? Oh, they thought, yeah, it's very nice to open up his mind. Just look at the results. And this isn't the first time something like that has happened. Obviously not. But will they be held responsible? Well, probably not. We still don't know their names. And interestingly enough, we don't know the name of the mad guy who did the job as well. It's very funny because when a guy is white and does something like this, we hear of it straight away. So we can assume that in some way this person is an ethnic minority. And again, you can also assume that the social services took him out because they didn't want to seem like they were being abusive to an ethnic minority. At least that's my guess. Again, they didn't want the side eye from their colleagues. And they probably won't have the accountability. We talk about institutional capture with these cases. In the case of baby Preston, we say, well, the social services didn't want to seem homophobic when two gay men wanted to adopt a baby. In the case of Henry Nowak, we say the police had been conditioned by the College of Policing to believe the brown-skinned person over the white-skinned person, but it isn't that. Well, that's a minor matter. What's going on is that all these people are more worried about the side eye from their colleagues than they are about the law they're supposed to uphold, that they're being paid to uphold, that they get their pensions from so-called upholding. And we have to change that. And the problem is institutional sclerosis and closing ranks. They know they can get away with these things because the government, the social services, all the various organisations, they just close in around their protected person. After all, you know, I mean, it's human nature. Somebody, a work colleague of yours might be incompetent, but really quite a nice guy with a young family to support. You don't want to see him lose his job. And that's going to influence your decisions when he's not doing things right. We have to separate the government from these services. We have to separate them. We have to stop the government protecting these people so they know they're going to be held to account for what they do or don't do. It's not possible completely to separate them, of course, but more barriers could be put in place. For instance, there is an organisation called the Independent Office for Police Conduct, which seems to be more a fig leaf than a proper investigative body. They could have stronger powers and be chosen from the people, not the establishment. And again, I'd say perhaps based on the jury system. You just get picked and have to serve like you do on a jury. And perhaps not for a long time, just for one case. One case comes up and you're part of the jury dealing with the fallout from that. Social services, again, there's an agency, the National Child Protection Agency. Again, I'd say it should be separated from the government and compiled on a jury system. on a one case only thing. Now, there might need to be a couple of top people who will be fixed term leaders, but most of the results should come from ordinary people who get the evidence and look through the consequences and publish the names. I think that's the only way to stop the inertia of officialdom, because police are too much in the pockets of the government now. You just saw I keep bringing up the Birmingham incident, but there's also the Hillsborough incident. The police were just being nice to the government and things dragged out. Nothing much happened. Hillsborough, it took 20 years for it to come to light, by which time some of the bereaved and victimised were dead. And, of course, the social services are too much in the pockets of local government, and particularly in the pockets of the politicians with their weird ideas of social engineering. And I think that's the only way to deal with it. Meanwhile, we have a huge government which protects itself, as you would expect, and an ever-mounting pile of evil taking us over. All right, well, that's my take on these awful happenings recently. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.